Okay, we're going to factor some more here, but it's actually going to be solving by factoring. One key thing is that you can only solve something if it has an equal sign. So if I look at this problem here, it's got an equal sign right there. It has to be equal to 0. So I'm going to have to manipulate this. I'm going to have to subtract 6 from both sides. And I've got x squared minus x minus 6 is equal to 0. From there, what I'm going to do is factoring just like I did in the last unit or section or whatever. X squared, so x and x. And I'm looking at the factors of negative 6 that will add up to be negative 1, and they are a minus 3 plus 2. Now lastly, to solve, I'm just going to take these factors and set them equal to 0 and do whatever inverse operations I need to do. So I would add 3 and get x is equal to 3, and subtract 2 and get x is equal to negative 2. And those would be my solutions if I were to solve by factoring. Now, typically, if it's a quadratic, and it is because it's x to the second power, you're going to end up with 2 answers. So you're trying to look for 2 answers. You might get the same answer twice, but that's not the norm, just kind of the exception. Okay, so here we go. Solve by factoring. Now remember, factoring means multiple different ways. In this case, I noticed that it is a greatest common factor of 3x. So I'll take that out, and I'm left with x minus 6. Now, just to check out, there's nothing more to factor in that x minus 6. So I'll take each factor, and I will set that equal to 0 and solve. So divide by 3, and x is 0 is one solution. Add 6, and x is equal to 6 is a second solution. So there's my 2 answers to my quadratic. Okay, same thing here. I noticed that they are both divisible by 4. Now, 4 is not going to give me a solution because it doesn't have an x in it. But when I take out that 4, what I'm doing is I'm knocking these values down to a smaller number. So like, for example, 4x squared turns into 4, and 36 can turn into 9. Okay, whenever I have 2 things like this, I'm going to try for the pattern of difference of 2 squares, and it works. So I've got x plus 3 is 1, and x minus 3 is another. And this 4 equals 0. That's not going to do anything for me, but subtract 3, and x is equal to negative 3. Add 3, and x is equal to positive 3. So there's the 2 answers there. Okay, factoring not equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. Make sure you don't combine those as like terms. So I'm going to also add 6 at the same time. Those are like terms, and I end up with 0 equals x squared minus 3x minus 4. Only one way to get x squared, and that's x times x. And the factors of negative 4 that add up to be a negative 3 would be negative 4 and 1. So minus 4 plus 1. Okay. Add 4 to both sides, and one solution is x equals 4. Subtract 1 from both sides and get x is equal to a negative 1. And there are my 2 solutions for that. Okay. These solutions are what are called zeros on a graph. And zeros are the same thing as x-intercepts, or sometimes called roots, or even called the solutions. So when I'm finding these values of x, I'm actually taking this quadratic and I'm finding out where it crosses the x-axis, or the x-axis. So I'm going to put a 0 in for y, which allows me to solve. Now a is 3 and c is negative 5, so I'm going to multiply those two together to get negative 15, and I'm going to use the factors of negative 15 to get me a positive 14, and that's going to be a positive 15 and a negative 1. So a little bit of room over here. 3x squared stays the same, plus 15x. Take away x, minus 5. Remember, this means to group 2 at a time, and I'll take out a 3x. Divide that 3x out, and I got x. Divide that 3x by out, I got plus 5. Meaning I need an x plus 5 over here, so I will divide them by negative 1. So I've got my greatest common factor of x plus 5 and my 3x minus 1 as my other. So subtract 5, and I get x is equal to negative 5. Add 1, I get 3x is equal to 1. Divide by 3, and the other one is x is equal to 1/3. So that means if I were to graph this, it's going to cross the x-axis right there at negative 5, and it's also going to cross the x-axis at 1/3. Hence the zeros, or the x-intercepts. Okay, a little bit more practice, if you will. Just checking to see how much more I got here. Careful here. When you have x plus 1 to the second power, it's x plus 1 times x plus 1. That's going to be x squared plus 2x plus 1 when I FOIL. If it's minus, it's going to be x minus 1 times x minus 1. And that's going to give me x squared minus 2x plus 1. So x squared plus 2x plus 1, distribute, and I get minus 3x squared plus 6x minus 3 equals 6. Combine like terms, I get minus 2x squared. I get a plus 8x with those two like terms. Combine those, and I get a minus 2 equals 6. So I got negative 2x squared plus 8x minus 8 equals 0. Look, they're all divisible by negative 2. So x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 0. And I can solve x minus 2 and x minus 2. So x equals 2 twice. Okay, over here, subtract 2x squared, add 8x. I'm just doing multiple steps at once, so that's all 0. 6x squared plus 13x, take away the 5. Again, if I'm going really fast, you can always pause this, slow things down that way, regroup, watch it again, things like that. But I'll take a times c, 6 times negative 5, and get negative 30. And I want factors that add up to be 13, so I believe they are, let's see, not 3 and 10. I'm tempted for that. Oh, here we go. A negative 2 and a positive 15. Okay, so 6x squared. I like to put the bigger one, so 15x is bigger than minus 2x. I'll go with that one first. Take out right here, let's see, what, divisible by 3x. That leaves me with 2x plus 5. So I need 2x plus 5 here. And that means I took out a negative 1. So 2x plus 5 and 3x minus 1. If you're struggling with factoring, that's kind of a big deal. You need to make sure you kind of get in, get some help, ask some questions. Khan Academy is another way. Add one, ask in class, but factoring is kind of a must for the next unit or two. So there we go. That is solving by factoring. It's really the same thing you would do with factoring, just at the end you set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x.